I'm homesick. Let's make more videos. Let's talk about Kruleboyz and their unit tier list. But first, thanks to all my patrons. Thanks Wiberian for the art, and Baron of Dice for supporting the channel. Get 5% off your order if you use code MDG at checkout. This is a tier list that I made at the start of 4th edition. This was after maybe the game had been out for a couple of weeks. So let's just review so we can see where things have changed. So in S tier, I have the Sludgeraker and Gutrippaz. This was, of course, because the Sludgeraker could give +1 damage to these mortal wounds, and the Gutrippaz were just a mortal wound blender. For those of you that don't remember, let's say you had 20 Gutrippaz. Well, 30 if you gave them venom encrusted weapons, they were going to hit for about this many mortal wounds, and we would double it. No, this doesn't look right. No, it's 41 attacks, and a third of them hit for mortals, and so we were dealing like 25 to 30 mortal wounds, and it was a huge, explosive amount of damage that came out, and so obviously they were S tier. And then Monster Killers were S tier because they were very efficient for how much damage they dealt, and their ability to shut off rampages and all this. Fantastic. A tier is units that are very, very good. If you see them in a list, you wouldn't be surprised because they're very good. They're not. S tier is like build around me. Like these are units that we build around. So the Breakaboss, very good. Don't need to talk about him much. Gobsprakk, I put an A tier because he was a 2-cast wizard, and this was back when he was at 380 points. The Killaboss, I put at A tier. Slippery Scumbag was very good. Swampcalla and Scumdre, I put at A tier. I thought that the mortal output from the Hobgrots would be interesting. I thought at the time that a double Sludgeraker list would be very good. Swampcalla Shaman was A tier. I don't know why he's not S tier. You're definitely going to include a Swampcalla Shaman in every single list that you make. And Boltboyz, I put at A tier because I didn't feel like they were as strong. This is, of course, coming off 3rd edition, where they lost crit mortals and instead got crit auto wound. So I was a little bit cold on them then, and I just thought that the damage output from the Gutrippaz was just going to be the way to go. And I was correct for that period of time. B tier, so B tier are units that are going to be conditionally good. They're going to be good sometimes, depending on what you're doing with your army. I put Kragnos there. I still kind of feel this way about Kragnos. I thought that this army is not really what you're doing with Kragnos, or whatever. Like, this army isn't really a Kragnos army. But Beji showed us differently with his Kruleboy list with a Marshcrawler, Sloggoth, and Kragnos. So I probably feel differently about him now. Hobgrots, I put at B tier. I'd say you could probably run them on the condition that you're running a Scumdre. Marshcrawler, I put at B tier. Again, I just didn't really think that this is what our army wanted to do. I saw teleporting and shooting as being the primary way to go, and pinning people in with like Monster Killers for those Gutrippaz to come in and charge. Killbow, B if you're playing into a monster meta, right? And then F tier is units that are not worth running ever. It's always better to run something different. Excuse me. So Nash Tooth was in this category. He was more expensive back then, but I didn't see any reason to run him ever. I always thought it would be better to have like a unit of Monster Killers instead, even though he's fast and is the only thing on a 3-up save. Killboss on foot, I also considered F. Like, what is he doing? Like, he's doing nothing. And the Murknob was also F. It's like, this is of course back in that. I think at this time, I think Murknob probably cost his own drop, and so there was no way that you were going to take him. Same with the Nash Tooth. He wasn't a swamp beast that could be included, but he was just his own drop, and so it was absolute trash. And now we have a Sludgeraker that we have to bring into the equation as well. So let's reset. So again, if we wanted to talk about the tiers and what they mean, S tier means that we're definitely including in the list. Every single list is going to have at least some of those S tier units or all of the S tier units in them. A tier is units that are very, very good, and when we do see them in lists, we're not surprised, but they're not like auto includes in every single list. B tier is units that are good if. They're good if if you're planning on like certain metas. They're good if you're including other units, if you're going for certain playstyles. And then F is there's no reason to ever take this unit. Right? There is no condition that you will want to take this unit over over any other unit. My Sludgeraboss is gone. So, I mean, that's kind of what the tiers are. I don't think that it's necessary to have like a million tiers, right? It's like auto include, probably include, include if, never include. Okay, so shall we start with the monsters? Let's start by going through all the monsters. In fact, why don't we start with the monster of monsters and talk about our friend Kragnos. So I think Kragnos right now in Kruleboyz is going to be A tier. This is an improvement from the last time that I evaluated him. I think that Kragnos, I think Benji basically showed us what you could do with Kragnos. I think that Kragnos and a Marshcrawler, giving your whole army like run and 3d6 charge, I think is legit. I think in an infantry meta, if we're playing lots of monster killers, if we're playing lots of Gutrippaz, being able to run and 3d6 charge them, just being able to jack up our movement in this army is super helpful. Because remember, like Gutrippaz on a 5-inch move, 7 with Field Sergeant, auto running 6 is 13 inches. So being able to do an average charge of 10 and putting you to 23 inches, that's a lot of movement. You're going to be able to get where you need to go. So I would put Kragnos and as an extension the Marshcrawler for very similar reasons, both in A tier. If you have Kragnos, if you have a Marshcrawler, if you have a bunch of foot infantry, have at her. Gobsprakk I'm going to put in at B tier. I'm a little bit, he is coming down in points. He's a little bit cheaper now. The fact that we got these new manifestations in our army is like, that does make Gobsprakk better. He has 2 casts for 1 drop. He can bring other things with him and other heroes with him in his regiment, which sets up things like Field Sergeant or Prime Beast. I would like to see some testing involving Gobsprakk. I would love for you guys to tell me what you guys think of Gobsprakk right now. But I'm not willing to put him in F because I don't think that I think there might be play there, but I'm definitely not prepared to put him in A. I don't know what that looks like. The Killaboss on Vulture, I'm going to stick in A tier. He's one of the only things in our army that's super fast, right? 12-inch flying. Slippery Scumbag is very good, being able to jump out of combat. It's 1-meet games, right? It's like you charge in, deal some impact mortals, and then you jump over them into the back line and just make the life of your opponent very difficult. This also worked very well with Sneak when we could sneak things around all over the map all the time. Being able to bring like 2 or 3 units over like behind your opponent and then have your Killaboss join them was awesome. He's also okay with Prized Beast. So yeah. Next monster, how about we talk about Sludgeraker and Scumdre. The thing that Sludgeraker does now, because what he used to be before, what he was before was like just a damage enabler for your Gutrippaz. So he was an auto include just because of how much damage he could do by proxy. But his role in the army has completely changed. Now he's like a tar pit unit. It's like him and then a unit that you give this Sludgeraker Venom to. They're going to be able to, on a 2-up, don't forget, it's on a 2-up. It's not automatic. If it was automatic, I'd be like, well, at least it's reliable. But on a 2-up, like, pick up to 3 units that had any damage allocated to them by combat attacks made by this unit or friendly units with the Sludgeraker Venom keyword. So it means that even if you have multiple units that have this Sludgeraker Venom keyword attacking 1 unit, that 1 unit still only has to do 1 roll of 2-up. It's not like it's for each time you attack, because if that was true, then this would be super reliable to at least shut down your opponent's like big huge infantry block, but it's not. So 1 out of 3 times this is going to do nothing, but 2 out of 3 times it's going to give -1 to wound, which is a good buff. But that's all that he's doing. You know, it's like what he's doing is 2 out of 3 times he's giving -1 to wound if he's in combat. But that means he has to actually get in combat. And he's not super survivable, right? 4-up save, 14 wounds, no ward. He's a little bit quick with an 8-inch move, so he has that going for him. But he's only got 1 rand on his attacks. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about him right now. I kind of want to say that he's F tier. I kind of think that for what his points are doing for you, that there's like no reason to take him. Yeah, I don't know. I think Swampcalla Scumdre is definitely F tier. he enables Hobgrots. He gives Hobgrots crit mortals, but Hobgrots just die. If your opponent sees that, they're like, your opponent is a smart, intelligent, thinking person who's going to try to do what they can to throw your plan off, right? To make sure that you're not doing what you're trying to do. So if they have any shooting or if they have any magic, they're just going to throw some damage at these Hobgrots. And even with one rend, right, Hobgrots are sitting on a 6-up save. So the vast majority of attacks in the game, you're not going to get to save against at all. So no save, 10 wounds, no ward. Like, they're just going to die, right? Like, they're just going to die. So, you know what? I'm just going to put Sludgeraker and Scumdre both in F tier. This might be something where I think the Swamp Boss might be B tier. But, I don't know. It just, like, what's he doing? Like, he's tar pitting? I don't know. Breakaboss is A tier. If you remember, or if you watched my video on Kruleboyz for the damage comparison, the Breakaboss is one of our most damaging units in the game. If we throw prized beast in there, I know you can't see this, it's too small, but if you throw prized beast in there, he's even a little bit better with that +1 to hit the whole time. And yeah, I mean, if you're looking for someone just to deal some straight up damage, I mean, he'll do it for you, right? He'll do it for you. The Vulture is up there because he is super mobile, and especially with Slippery Scumbag is even more mobile. So that's kind of why he's there. I still think he's probably overcosted, but the Breakaboss is in a good spot. I know people like it. I've seen lots of lists that just run a bunch of them. All the power to you, right? There's no way to make them fast. I'm pretty sure that they're just on a 5-up. Every time the screen flickers, you know it's because I'm checking my PDF on the side. Yeah, so 5-up, right? 4-up save, 12 wounds. He should have, if he had 5 control, it might be a little bit better, but I don't know. He's still A tier. Like, he does his job. His job is to come in after everything else has been fighting, after a bunch of things are weak, and to come in and clean up units when they're like at half strength or less. He can come in, and as long as he's not taking a ton of damage, his passive healing should be able to keep him in the game. What you don't want to do is throw a Breakaboss into like a fully buffed up reinforced unit of infantry or cavalry, because he'll just kind of melt. He'll just kind of die. But if his job is to sweep in at the end and clean things up, I think that you're doing okay. I think that he can manage that, no problem. Boltboyz, I'm going to say, are S tier. I think that if you're playing Kruleboyz, that you include Boltboyz every single game. I think at this point, at least the way that I'm thinking about the army right now, is that you include at least 2 reinforced units of Boltboyz, because Gutrippaz don't really deal a ton of damage anymore. We're seriously lacking in damage output for this army, so Boltboyz are, again, it. That's how we're going to primarily do the bulk of our damage. So, yeah, at least that's how I feel about it right now. I might feel different 2 weeks from now. We'll see what the October. What month is it? We'll see what the next FAQ brings us for Kruleboyz, but for right now, I'm kind of thinking that lots of Boltboyz is going to be the way to do it. I've been playing around with lists that have 3 reinforced units of Boltboyz and a Killbow. For that reason, I'm not sure if... I don't think a Killbow is S tier. I don't think you auto include it, but I think throwing 1 in your army right now is probably good. The psychological warfare that it does against your opponent and their monsters, I think, is legitimate. And moreover, we're just relying on shooting. So, you know, if you want to win your games with Kruleboyz right now, having a Killbow in there and then trying to get lucky and deal 12 damage against a monster in a single round of shooting, I think is fine. I'm not seeing a ton of monsters in the meta, right? Like, I'm seeing lots of cavalry and infantry and foot heroes. I think we've sort of shifted away a little bit from like that centerpiece model of like how many monsters, you know, how many centerpieces are running around out there on the table. So I'll just kind of stick them in A tier. Maybe B tier, but again, it's like he's not very good, but we need shooting. We need shooting, I think. So A tier it is. Gutrippaz, I think, are probably also A tier. I could see 1 reinforced unit of Gutrippaz in the army. I think their role is not to deal damage like they did before, but just to hopefully save stack them, and they get the -1 to hit, and maybe you choking missed, and you're just trying to clog up the board. So, like, I don't know. They're not a great tar pit, but that's what we got, right? That's what we got. They're not in there to deal damage anymore, or at least nowhere near as much damage as they were dealing before. like nowhere near. Like the Sludgeraker change halved their damage, right? Because now you no longer get that +1 damage to the crit mortals. And then the change to sneak means that venom encrusted weapons is a lot harder to actually get. So they got their damage reduced by like 3, like by a lot. Right, by a lot. Like divided by 3. Divided by 2 for the Sludgeraker, and then probably divided by half again with venom encrusted weapons. So their damage is now like, they went from the most mortal output in the game to tickles, right? So it's like now you have 41 attacks and 1 in 6 is a mortal. So we went from like 15 mortals to like 6 or 7. And because they're not, so this is why you need to stack those saves on them, because they're not super survivable. 2 wounds on a 5-up save, they need to be like saving on 4s, ignoring a rend before they'll survive stuff at all, right? And hopefully their scare tactic shield is going off and -1 to hit against them. I mean, this is why the Sludgeraker might be, I mean, we'll take the Sludgeraker and we'll put him at B tier. This is on the condition that if you're going to be running a whole bunch of Gutrippaz in the attempt to tar pit your opponent in the center of the map, if that's what your goal is and that's what you're trying to do, then a Sludgeraker will help you do that. I don't think that's the right play, but I think that's fine. Hobgrots, I think, are F tier. I don't think you take them. I don't think you take them ever. Right now, I believe they're at 90 points. I think they got to come down. They got to come down more. I could see them being like 60 points. They used to be able to run and throw their scrap grenades, and that was super cool. They can't do that anymore. So they're slow now too, right? They only move 5. If they could run and throw their scrap grenades, I think they would still be, like, that's the thing about them in 3rd edition that made them really good. They were cheap. You could line them up in a straight line. You can't do that anymore in 4th, which is fine. But you used to be able to line them all up in a straight line, and they used to be able to go 11 inches and throw their scrap grenades. So they actually used to be pretty cool. But now I just don't think that you play them for 90 points, right? Like, so if a reinforced unit is 180 points, I think it's better to have 10 Gutrippaz than 20 Hobgrots in a unit. I think pretty much every time. Yeah, I mean, the Gutrippaz are 30 points cheaper. They have as many wounds. They have 1 better save. They have crit mortals, which the Hobgrots don't. And they also have -1 to hit them on a 3-up, which the Hobgrots don't. So if you have exactly 90 points left in your list, you take a Sludgeraboss for Field Sergeant instead. Killaboss on foot, I think, is still just straight F tier. I don't see a reason to take him ever. He doesn't do anything. He's the worst. He's the worst unit in our book, I think. Which is really too bad, because I always felt like the Killaboss should take the role that the Sludgeraboss took. The Killaboss should have been leading the Grots, and then the Killaboss on Gnashtooth should be leading the Gutrippaz. And then, which he does, to be fair, I think. Like, you could sort of see it that way. And then a Vulture boss is leading, like, the army. You know what I mean? Like, he's, like, a boss of bosses. So, yeah, I mean, his ability doesn't do anything. It's quite weak. Yeah, it's just bad. All-out attack command, add 1 to wound rolls. Yeah, it just... yeah, doesn't do much. Doesn't do much. Killaboss on Gnashtooth, I think, is probably also still F tier. His advantage is that he's fast on a 10-inch move. He's more survivable than a lot of the other units in our book with a 3-up save, right? He's like the only 3-up save, I think, in the entire book, which to me, I don't understand. Like, fine, sure, he's got a 3-up save. But his sort of role, the way that he's written, is he's supposed to be aggressive with Gutrippaz and taking objectives away from your opponent, right? With this all part of the plan, he adds control. And then while this unit is contesting an objective you do not control, add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Kruleboyz that are wholly within 12 inches. So it's not Kruleboy infantry, it's just all Kruleboyz. So +1 to hit, but... the Gutrippaz deal crit mortals, so the +1 to hit is like... I mean, it's better now that the Sludgeraker's gone. So maybe he'll drop enough points where he'll see play. That's what happened in 3rd, right? Look at Aaron Newbaum, he just played a whole bunch of them. Yeah. Monster Killers are S tier. You need at least 1 unit of Monster Killers in your army. Even if you're not going into a very monster... If you are going into any kind of monsters, the ability to shut off rampages and make monsters strike last is very, 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 very strong. Moreover, they deal just as much damage as Gutrippaz without any help or any buffs. They're not as survivable, but they are definitely worth their points. They're 120 points, right? They're cheap. You should include at least 1 unit in your army. The Murknob, I'm going to say, is B tier. The reason he's B tier is if you want a Field Sergeant and you have 100 points, the Murknob makes for a good Field Sergeant. He also is very good at sitting in the tower, in the Scaregrot Tower. Nope, Scaregrot Totem. I think it's what it's called in Kruleboyz. Yeah, Scaregob Totem. So, because when he's in that totem, his aura extends from the base of the totem. So that 6-up ward is not nothing. But again, if you want to throw Field Sergeant on him, it's fine. Like in some lists I'm writing now, I have Field Sergeant on him, and he follows around Boltboyz to give them +2 move, making them a 7-inch move instead of 5. And then they have a 6-up ward. Maybe it'll save you a model here and there. It's not going to be a lot. Swampcalla Shaman S tier. You're going to be including one of these guys in every single list, probably with the Swamp Staff. 122 cast +1 to cast Wizard is so good. 120 points for a 2 cast +1 power. No, for a 2 cast +1 to cast Wizard. Very, very strong. Especially now with our new manifestations, you're going to be taking this guy almost every time. Gobsprakk could come down in points to a point where he would also be A tier or S tier. But he has to come down in points. Gobsprakk is not a combat character. He does not fight very well. He's not survivable. He doesn't survive very well. What he does is he's fast with a 12-inch fly. His War Scroll spell is okay. You're probably not going to run into a ton of monsters. It's okay. It's almost like they're bone splitters now, hey? We have like Killbow, Gobsprakk, and Monster Killers that are all just anti-monster, right? It feels like that's kind of like what we got going on. So if your opponent doesn't have any monsters, it kind of sucks a little bit. But what Gobsprakk is, like I said, is a 2-cast fast wizard. What's that worth? He can fight a little bit, but like, what's that worth in points? It's not 330, right? It's not 330. It's more like 240. Like, there's still, I feel, quite a ways away with Gobsprakk. Maybe 300. You know, maybe 290. Maybe him and the Killboss should be worth the same thing. The Killboss can take Slippery Scumbag. Is slightly fightier. And Commanding View is whatever, like redeploy 4. Like, it's fine, but... Yep, and then last but not least, we have the Sludgeraboss. So I'm going to put the Sludgeraboss at B tier, and the reason is if you want Field Sergeant, he's 80 points. He's an 80-point Field Sergeant. He's an 80-point, I'm going to stand in the Scaregob Totem for the entire game unit. So if that's what you're looking for, if you want the cheapest, if you only have 80 points left, or even 90 points left, right? And you don't have a Field Sergeant, this guy S Field Sergeant could be pretty good. You know, if you have 100 points, you take the Murknob instead. But he is the cheapest Field Sergeant that you can get. He's also the cheapest hero that can stand in the totem that you can get. Okay, so compared to last edition, the biggest loser is Swampboss. Sorry, is just a Sludgeraker Beast. Sludgeraker Beast is the biggest loser of this patch right now. Biggest loser. And the biggest winner from the last time I evaluated them, probably the Marshcrawler. I think that Run and Charge is a lot better than I was thinking in this game, or in this army. But yeah, overall, I'd say we sort of fell overall. But that's okay. Let's wait and see what the next balance patch brings for our boys. Until then, like, subscribe, wah.